America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad, to continue to fight through the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and the Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
You would think the Republican Party would be the losers during the 1970s. Stagflation became a thing with a Republican in the White House, Richard Nixon. This was before he was forced to resign due to gross abuse of his power. How could the Republicans benefit after giving such an incompetent, corrupt president to the country? Mostly because Nixon wasn't incompetent in every way. He had always been an effective politician, someone who could tap into the mood of the country when he desired. Shortly after becoming president, he told his staff to start thinking politically instead of worrying about running things well. This summarizes Nixon's leadership style to a T. He did what looked good, rather than what was good. In the first months of his presidency, Nixon came across an article in New York Magazine titled "The Revolt of the White Lower Middle Class" by Pete Hamill. Hamill thoughtfully explained why so many white Northerners voted for George Wallace in the 1968 Democratic primaries. He saw hard-working men, the grandchildren of immigrants who had come through Ellis Island, who could barely afford to support their families. These men watched as the movement for black civil rights and women's rights gained national attention. Government was pouring resources into addressing these problems, all while they were losing ground in a stagflating economy. Black people were demanding better jobs, better representation in labor unions, and equitable housing, and they were gaining ground. Women were demanding the right to abortions, divorce, and jobs, and they were gaining ground. Meanwhile, what were white workers getting? Who was listening to them? A rage was boiling up inside of them. The Democratic Party, the party of FDR, had always been the party of the working man. And now, what had they become? The party of hippies, civil rights, and loud women. What was Wallace offering them? He was offering to make them the center of the party again. And who did the Democrats actually choose? They chose George McGovern, the candidate of the hippies, the blacks, the women, and the gays. Pete Hamill explained that the Democratic Party had lost touch with its white ethnic base. Richard Nixon went out of his way to give them a home in the Republican Party. He got a golden chance to do this in 1970. In May of that year, 4 students at Kent State University were killed by National Guardsmen during a protest of Nixon's bombing of Cambodia during the Vietnam War. In remembrance of the 4 slain students, and to continue the protest against Nixon's expansion of the war, young anti-war protesters took to the streets of the financial district in Manhattan. They flew an American flag at half-mast in honor of the Kent State victims. Then, a group of construction workers with hard hats and heavy tools pushed through the line of police to confront them. They were there to raise the American flag flying at half-mast. 70 anti-war protesters were injured. The police seemed uninterested in protecting them. On May 20th, the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York delivered 100,000 hard hat protesters to the financial district with signs that read, "We support Nixon and Agnew." This event, known as the Hard Hat Riots, proved everything Pete Hamill had written about the year before. But why did these hard hats come out to attack the protesters? Part of the reason was simple patriotism. They wanted the United States to win the Vietnam War, and they saw the students as traitors. Also, these students were attending college, enabling them to avoid military service. To the hard hats, they were weak, sniveling children of privilege who were shirking their duty to their country in order to criticize it, all while their sons were being sent off to die. Nixon, never one to miss out on a chance to score political points, supported the hard hat rioters, saying, "Thank God for the hard hats." He met with the head of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York, who told him that the hard hat men admired his masculinity. He then presented Nixon with his very own hard hat with the words Commander-in-Chief on it. This was a turning point for Nixon and the entire Republican Party. Throughout the rest of his presidency, he made sure to appeal to the hard hat crowd. Unlike other Republicans, he didn't try to weaken the power of labor unions, although he didn't try to strengthen them either. The furthest he would go was creating the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, mostly because it looked good on paper while costing him little politically or financially. He could tell the hard hats, hey, look what I did to make your workplace safer. This was Nixon's bread and butter, appealing to poor white working people. It was hard to do in economic policy, since Republicans have always been the party of the business class, but it was much easier to do with issues of race and gender, what we would call culture war issues today. Nixon was the original culture warrior president. Perhaps the most sensitive culture war issue of the day was court-ordered busing. Courts ordered school districts in the North to send black students to predominantly white schools in order to fully comply with the Brown v. Board of Education decision. Since white schools tended to be better funded than black schools, this was seen as a way to equalize educational opportunities between the races. It was called busing because students would be transported to schools on buses. White parents came out to protest, especially in cities like Boston. Most of them didn't consider themselves racist at all, with many of them claiming that they supported school integration, just not on the backs of their own children. The way they saw it, some judge somewhere was trying to score political points on the backs of their kids. Behind it all were the civil rights activists, the hippies, and the Democratic Party of George McGovern. And you know who stood against it? Richard Nixon. Busing was the perfect culture war issue for him. As president, he had little power over public schools. He couldn't stop busing from happening, but he could chirp about it. It cost him nothing. Busing was just one of many issues that allowed him to pose as a friend to the white working class. These are the people who would vote for him in 1972 and, as we'll see later, the people who would vote for Reagan in 1980. Nixon called them the silent majority, the people who went to work, paid taxes, and didn't protest. A more revealing term that gained more traction is working class. Americans have used the term working class to refer to mostly poor and lower middle class white people. The inference behind this is that people of color are not working class. In many cases, black people and working class are used to refer to separate voting blocks. Black people voted for McGovern in 1972 and the working class voted for Nixon. But aren't black people part of the working class too? In fact, don't black people make up a disproportionate number of the working class and occupy jobs that pay way less than other working class jobs? Yet, working class is usually reserved for poor white people. The inference is that black people don't work. The inference is that black people complain. They ask for handouts and special privileges. They ask for programs that would take money away from white working people to go into their own pockets. This is how Nixon's campaign painted McGovern's $1,000 demo grant in 1972.
Senator George McGovern recently submitted a welfare bill to the Congress. According to an analysis by the Senate Finance Committee, the McGovern bill would make 47% of the people in the United States eligible for welfare. 47%. Almost every other person in the country would be on welfare. The Finance Committee estimated the cost of this incredible proposal at $64 billion the first year. That's 6 times what we're spending now. And who's going to pay for this? Well, if you're not the 1 out of 2 people on welfare, you do.
He implied white working class people were going to fund lazy people of color who didn't want to work. This was a popular stereotype among poor white people, one that would devolve into Reagan's welfare queen trope during the 1980s. Nixon's greatest accomplishment wasn't OSHA, the EPA, or even opening up relations with China. It was how he led poor white people away from making common cause with poor black people. It's the way he was able to take the very real anger poor white people felt about being left behind by an economy that was stagflating, and directing that anger at black people and women. Republican presidents like Reagan and Trump merely worked from a playbook written by Nixon.